Gladiator 2, 2025, picks up more than 2 decades after the legendary story of Maximus in Ridley Scott's original Gladiator, 2000. The sequel focuses on Lucius, the young boy who was the nephew of Emperor Commodus and the son of Lucilla. Now grown into a man, Lucius must navigate the brutal and political world of Rome, torn between power, survival, and legacy. The first myth to address is the assumption that Gladiator 2 will simply be a retelling of the original story, with a new gladiator rising to avenge injustice. But according to early insights, Ridley Scott has promised a very different direction. Unlike Maximus, Lucius is not a soldier-turned-slave but someone born into privilege, forced to reckon with Rome's corruption from within. This change immediately challenges the myth that sequels always repeat the same formula. To understand Gladiator 2, we must revisit the historical backdrop of ancient Rome. Many viewers believe the first film accurately portrayed gladiatorial combat and Roman politics. In truth, while Gladiator captured the spirit of the era, it bent facts for dramatic storytelling. Gladiators didn't always fight to the death. Many were valuable investments owned by trainers and spared if they fought well. The Colosseum was indeed a grand arena, but battles included not just men versus men, but staged hunts, executions, and naval recreations. Gladiator 2 is expected to expand on this variety of spectacle, showing us a broader look at Roman entertainment. Another myth to tackle is the character of Lucius himself. Fans often believe he's a fictional invention. But the truth is, Lucius was inspired by historical figures tied to the Antonine dynasty of Rome, though not a direct representation. Ridley Scott blends fact and fiction, creating characters who symbolize the struggles of their era rather than representing specific historical individuals. This myth versus fact tension is what makes the Gladiator films so compelling. In Gladiator 2, themes of legacy and identity are central. Lucius grew up idolizing Maximus, who died fighting for honor and Rome's future. A myth that many fans have carried is that Maximus would somehow return in the sequel, especially after rumors of early scripts where he was resurrected in strange, almost supernatural ways. In reality, Ridley Scott abandoned those drafts, grounding the sequel in a more historical, realistic tone. Maximus lives on only through memory, shaping Lucius's choices and ideals. As Gladiator 2 unfolds, Lucius steps into a world where Rome is no longer the glorious empire Maximus dreamed of restoring. The empire has grown more fragile, plagued by internal power struggles, greed, and unrest among the people. This backdrop reveals one of the greatest myths about Rome, that its empire was unshakable and eternal. In truth, by the late 2nd and 3rd centuries, Rome faced immense instability. Corruption among emperors, economic crises, and barbarian threats weakened what once seemed indestructible. Ridley Scott's sequel will likely reflect this fragility, showing how even the greatest civilizations can fall. One central theme of the film will be Lucius's internal conflict. Unlike Maximus, who fought as a general and gladiator, Lucius must choose between the life of privilege he was born into and the harsh realities of the arena. Fans often assume that anyone entering the Colosseum was a slave with no choice, but the fact is more complex. Many gladiators were prisoners of war or criminals, yes, but some volunteered. Known as octorati, these free men chose the gladiator's life for fame, money, or escape from debt. This fact busts the myth that gladiators were always forced into combat against their will. Gladiator may second explore this complexity through Lucius's journey. Another myth the film is likely to challenge is the idea of Rome as a meritocracy where bravery won freedom. While the Colosseum's audience could sometimes spare a gladiator's life, freedom was rare. Most gladiators fought for years, and even celebrated champions were not guaranteed release. The famous idea of winning the wooden sword, rudis, granting freedom, was more the exception than the rule. So while Hollywood often portrays gladiators earning freedom through honor, the truth was harsher. Gladiator 2 might blur this line, showing how Lucius's status gives him advantages most fighters never had. Politics also play a major role. The myth many viewers carry from the first Gladiator is that emperors personally decided the fate of fighters in the arena with a thumbs up or down. In reality, the gesture was more nuanced, and emperors weren't always present. The Colosseum was often used as political theater, distracting the masses with spectacle while deeper corruption rotted the empire. Ridley Scott will likely use the sequel to expose how gladiatorial games weren't just blood sport, they were tools of control. Another fascinating angle is the myth of Roman invincibility in battle. While the legions were powerful, Rome suffered defeats against skilled enemies like the Parthians and Germanic tribes. The sequel may highlight Rome's military vulnerability, reminding audiences that even great empires crumble when they underestimate others. And then there's the lingering shadow of Maximus. Lucius grew up admiring him as a symbol of honor. The myth that Maximus could rise again was popular among fans, but the reality is that he exists only in memory. Instead of resurrecting Maximus, Ridley Scott uses him as a moral compass for Lucius. This reflects a deeper truth. Legends often live on, not through their return, but through how future generations interpret their legacy. As Gladiator II reaches its climax, the myths of Rome collapse alongside its illusions of power. The Colosseum, once a symbol of glory, becomes a mirror showing the empire's decay. Lucius, no longer just a boy inspired by Maximus, now carries the weight of choices that will define his destiny. One of the biggest myths about ancient Rome is that the games unified the people, giving them pride and purpose. The reality was darker. Gladiatorial combat often distracted the masses from political corruption, poverty, and rebellion. Bread and circuses wasn't just entertainment, it was control. By exposing this truth, the film forces us to ask, was Rome's greatness real, or was it all theater? Another myth is the idea of Rome's endless dominance. History tells us the empire's power fractured, its legions weakened, and its enemies grew bolder. In the sequel, Lucius will face enemies both within Rome and outside its borders. This reflects the truth that Rome didn't collapse overnight, it eroded from within. The very institutions that once made it strong became the seeds of its downfall. The film also shatters the myth of the heroic gladiator always triumphing in the arena. In reality, most fights didn't end in glorious victory, they ended in exhaustion, blood, and death. Gladiators were not seen as equals to Roman citizens, they were tools of entertainment. But through Lucius, Ridley Scott gives us a perspective rarely told: what happens when someone of noble blood experiences the brutality firsthand. This blurs the line between myth and truth. At the emotional core of the film is Maximus's legacy. Many fans hoped Russell Crowe's character would somehow return, but Gladiator II reminds us that heroes live on through memory. Lucius's every decision is haunted by the myth of Maximus's honor. The truth is that no one can live up to legends completely, but we can carry their values forward. This gives the story its soul. Rome may fall, but the ideals of courage, loyalty, and justice endure. Finally, the ending of Gladiator may second challenge the myth of Rome as eternal. While the empire eventually collapsed, its influence lived on through law, culture, and architecture. In the same way, Lucius's story shows us that individuals can rise above corruption and illusion. The arena may take lives, but it cannot kill truth. As the credits roll, viewers will leave not only entertained but also questioning what was real about Rome, and what was simply myth. Ridley Scott doesn't just make a sequel, he peels back the layers of history, reminding us that every empire is built on both glory and illusion.